It was my 75th birthday. I remember the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air, and the soft hum of the radio as I stirred the pot of thickened gravy. The table was set as it always had been. 5 plates, each with its own delicate touch of care. The old china had been pulled from the back cupboard, and I had dressed in the blue floral dress, the one Harold had always said made me look 10 years younger. It was supposed to be a day to celebrate, and Tom, my only son, had promised me it would be special. He had always been the caring one, the one who made sure to remember the little things. The years had passed, but I always trusted him. Tom and Clara, his wife, had promised me something simple yet meaningful. Trip. Vacation. The first in years. I had been excited. The very thought of leaving the house, of breathing in the saltwater air like when Harold was alive, made me smile in anticipation. But they didn't come. The clock ticked away the hours, each minute taking me closer to the realization that something wasn't right. By 9 p.m., the candles had melted down halfway, and the food sat cold on the table. My hands trembled as I finally set the fork down. The birthday card I had picked out for myself, one that said, "You're still glowing," in glitter, now felt like a cruel joke. I had always believed Tom when he said he would take care of everything, that he would make sure I wasn't alone on my special day. But as I sat there, surrounded by untouched plates, I knew deep down that I had been abandoned. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a forgotten detail. No, they had chosen to leave me alone. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that something must have come up. But it didn't feel right. Not this time. The phone didn't ring, no one knocked on my door. No one reached out to say, "Happy birthday, Mama." Not even a text. I slowly wrapped the leftover food, already too tired to care about the disappointment. I went to bed, leaving the purple suitcase by the door, still packed, still waiting. The next morning, I woke up to the silence of an empty house. I shuffled around, going through my routine, brushing my teeth, tying my scarf, and sitting in the kitchen. I stared at the pie I had baked from scratch the night before. The smell of cinnamon still lingered in the air, but the warmth was gone. I couldn't bring myself to eat. Then Tom called. His voice, rushed and apologetic, came through the phone as I answered, hoping against hope that he had finally remembered. "Mama, I'm sorry about yesterday. I know we promised, but things didn't go as planned. We had to postpone the trip. You know how it is with work. But listen, we've been thinking and we really want to make sure you're comfortable. We were thinking you could stay with us for a bit. Maybe we can look into moving you closer to us. The house. It's too much for you now, isn't it?" I held the phone in my hand, the words still echoing in my ears. Too much for me. I wanted to ask. Hadn't I taken care of this house by myself for years? Didn't I keep it running when Harold was alive? Didn't I care for Tom when he was small? And now they wanted to tell me it was too much for me. But I stayed quiet. I let him go on. The guilt, the soft urgency in his voice, almost made me believe I was the burden. "You're right, Tom," I said, my voice weak. "I'm just getting old." But something shifted inside me. I began to hear the undertones of manipulation. The words, though coated with care, were like a thin layer of sugar covering something else. My heart felt heavy in my chest. The thought of leaving this house, my home, the place where every memory of my life had been built, was too much to bear. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that they wanted me gone. Wanted my house. "Sign the papers, Mama," Tom had said, his voice now more insistent. "Just a few documents, a formality. This is for your own good. We just want to make sure you're safe." I wanted to refuse. I wanted to scream. To tell him I wasn't some helpless old woman. But the look on his face, the pleading in his voice, made me hesitate. I knew deep down that he wasn't just asking me to move. No, he was asking me to surrender control. To hand over everything I had worked so hard for. And I was beginning to realize that maybe, just maybe, I had been wrong all along to trust him so blindly. I sat in that sterile room with its bland beige walls, a far cry from the vibrant home I had spent my life building. The gentle hum of the fluorescent lights above me did nothing to calm the storm that raged inside my chest. At first, I told myself this was just a temporary stay, a little break for my body to rest, as Tom had so kindly put it. But after a few days, it felt more like a slow suffocation. The place they had sent me to, this so-called retreat, was nothing more than a gilded cage. I quickly realized that it wasn't just my independence they were taking from me. It was my very identity. Each morning, I was awakened at the same time by a nurse with a clipboard and a smile that was more mechanical than kind. "Good morning, Mrs. Hawthorne," she'd say, her voice devoid of warmth. "Time for your exercise." Exercise. The only thing I was interested in was the quiet, the comfort of my old chair at home, the soft creak of the floors under my feet. But here they told me when to sleep, when to eat, when to get up and shuffle around. All of it felt like an invasion. "Mrs. Hawthorne, you need to take these," a nurse would say, handing me pills I never asked for. "It's for your health, dear." Health. What was wrong with my health? I wasn't confused. I wasn't frail. But every day felt like I was being pushed further into a corner, my choices whittled down to a handful of what they considered acceptable options. What made me the most furious was how they treated me like a child. How Tom and Clara, behind their sweet smiles, pretended they were doing this for me. I was supposed to be grateful. I was supposed to thank them for putting me in this prison. But I wouldn't thank them. I spent my days walking the hallways, trying to find a way out, a sliver of my old life that had been lost in the shuffle of their good intentions. But each time I approached the door, a nurse would stop me, her smile sweet but firm like a leash around my neck. "You're doing so well, Mrs. Hawthorne. Let's just go back to your room and get some rest." She'd gently steer me away, her fingers light but insistent on my arm. No one here saw me as a person. I was just another patient to be cared for, another problem to be solved like the others around me who had forgotten how to fight. But I hadn't forgotten. The first few days were the hardest. I tried calling Tom and the phone rang and rang, but he never answered. He left me to stew in my loneliness, as if he had already declared me gone. After all, I was just an old woman. Wasn't it enough that I was breathing? Wasn't it enough that I had once cared for him, that I had loved him beyond reason? He didn't care anymore. Then one afternoon, after a particularly uncomfortable therapy session, where I was told to practice breathing exercises, I found something that gave me a glimpse of the truth. A pile of papers in a staff room, documents about the retreat, the ones I had never been given to sign. The contract that had locked me away here was nowhere to be found. Instead, there were financial forms, plans for the future, and a list of clients Tom had been communicating with. I wasn't just a patient. I was a business deal. A pawn in his and Clara's game. My mind raced. The truth was clear. They were cutting me out of my own life, forcing me to hand over control. The worst part was Clara. I had always thought her the perfect match for Tom, but now I saw the manipulative coldness in her eyes. She didn't care for me. She didn't even try to hide it. Every time I asked a question, she deflected. "Don't worry, Evelyn," she would say in that too sweet voice. "We just want what's best for you. This is what you need." What I needed was my freedom. A week passed. A week of sitting in this artificial peace, pretending that I didn't hear the whispers, pretending I didn't see the way the nurses spoke behind my back. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I was not going to sit back and let them take everything I had worked for, everything I had lived for. I started with small rebellions. I began writing down every detail, each date, each nurse's name. I remembered how to fight, how to keep track of things when they tried to erase you. And when the staff wasn't looking, I slipped into the small library room and started searching for ways to reach out. The phone was the next step. I didn't care if the nurses told me I was not allowed to make calls. I was going to call whoever I needed to get out of here. Each day my resolve strengthened. Tom thought he could control me, thought he could erase me from my own life. But he was wrong. I wasn't finished yet. Happened like a flash. One minute I was sitting in my sterile room, listening to the distant sounds of nurses and patients moving around, and the next, I overheard something that made my blood run cold. "Did you hear? The family's saying she passed away," a nurse mentioned casually to another as they walked past my door. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, and the world seemed to blur. I wasn't sure if it was a joke, but it felt too real, too deliberate. I had always known Tom had grown distant, but I never imagined he'd go this far. To erase me, to turn me into a ghost, was beyond what I had ever feared. But hearing those words made it clear. I wasn't just isolated in a nursing home. I was being erased piece by piece from the world I had once known. The realization was like a slap in the face. They had declared me dead. My son. My flesh and blood. He had taken the liberty of telling the world I was gone. Not just my friends, not just the distant relatives, but even the children, the ones I loved so dearly. He had told them without a second thought that I had passed away on a trip. The words stung in ways I couldn't even put into words. I had never felt so small, so invisible. In their eyes I was already gone, and now it seemed there was no coming back. I tried to stay calm. I tried to reason with myself. It's just a misunderstanding. Maybe they didn't mean it that way, I thought. But deep down I knew the truth. This was no accident. This was no simple mistake. Tom and Clara were trying to bury me alive. At night, I would lie awake in my uncomfortable bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I had been tricked. No, more than that, I had been used. It wasn't about love or care for my well-being. Never was. Tom didn't care for me. He never did. He cared for what he could take, for what he could inherit. I was just a means to an end. In those long, sleepless nights, I started to piece together everything that had been happening. The subtle manipulations, the false promises, the concern they had shown me. It was all part of a bigger plan. They had been isolating me, breaking me down, one pill, one form, one lie at a time. And now they had turned me into a ghost, a woman who was no longer a part of her own life. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Began to strategize. Slowly, quietly, I started finding ways to fight back. I began leaving notes for the staff, asking for information, asking for phone calls, asking for something. Anything that could get me out of this trap. But each time my requests were ignored or dismissed. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a nuisance. A body to be moved around like a piece of furniture. One afternoon, as I was walking down the hall, I saw him. My son. He stood in the doorway of the nurse's station, speaking with one of the nurses. His voice calm, calculated, as if everything were normal. He saw me, and for a brief moment our eyes locked. His face remained unchanged. "Everything's fine, Mom," he said. His voice coated in that practiced, empty concern. "I'm just making sure you're comfortable here. Everything's taken care of." The words sliced through me like a blade. I saw the lie in his eyes, the arrogance of someone who thought he had already won. Comfortable. I wanted to scream at him. "You've stolen my life." But I didn't. I just stood there, staring at him, my heart pounding with rage and betrayal. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust him, to hold on to the son I once knew. But I couldn't. He wasn't the boy I raised anymore. He was a stranger, a man who had turned his back on everything that mattered. I turned away, my fists clenched at my sides. The room spun around me, but I stayed rooted to the spot. I knew then, with a clarity I had never known before, that I could never trust him again. Not after this. Not after what he had done to me. That night I made a decision. I was going to leave. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but I would find a way. I would get back to my home. I would fight for my dignity. And I would make sure Tom and Clara knew that no one could ever take what I had worked for, what I had built, without a fight. And so, I began to prepare. Every corner of the place had begun to feel the same. Sterile, white, suffocating. The walls seemed to close in tighter with each passing day. I had been here long enough now to learn the routine, the faces of the staff, and the silent, oppressive rules that governed every part of my life. They thought I didn't notice, that I didn't see the cameras watching my every move, the locked doors that led nowhere, the windows that refused to open more than a crack. They thought I was just another old woman who had lost her spark. But they were wrong. I had spent too many years making plans, too many years living my life on my own terms. I wasn't going to let them take that from me. Not now. Not ever. The first time I noticed the hidden surveillance cameras, I had been sitting in the lounge, trying to appear as if I was just one of the docile residents. But my eyes weren't as weak as they thought. The small, dark lenses perched high in the corners of the room, monitoring us. And those doors, the ones that locked after 9 p.m., I noticed how they creaked slightly when you tried to open them. How they seemed to hold some secret. I had been waiting for the moment when I could finally make my move. Every day I watched, I listened. The staff treated me like I was invisible. Their polite smiles and rehearsed kindness were all just masks for their real intentions. They were here to keep me in line, to keep me confined. But what they didn't realize was that I was already planning. One day, while they were busy chatting about something in the staff room, I slipped into the hallway and made my way to the back of the building. The door was locked, of course, but I noticed a small keyhole underneath the knob. It was the kind of lock they used on doors no one was supposed to open. But I wasn't supposed to be here either. I had made friends with a few of the residents, and some of them were more than willing to help. One of the men, a former truck driver with an uncanny ability to remember everything, told me about a passage leading to the staff exit. He had noticed it while being shuffled around the facility. It was hidden behind a thick curtain in the old hallway where the delivery carts were stored. No one ever went there. I began to put the pieces together. I knew I had to act quickly, and I had to be smart. The staff was too busy with their routines to notice me. The key to my freedom lay in those small, seemingly insignificant details. The locked doors, the unnoticed passageways, the way the nurses never seemed to check certain areas at night. But there was one problem, the fear. The thought of leaving, of stepping into the unknown, made my stomach churn. What if I got caught? What would happen to me? The consequences of failure, the pain of being caught in this trap again. It was enough to freeze anyone in place. I could hear my own heart pounding, the doubt creeping in like a shadow. But then I thought about Tom, about Clara, about how they had already decided my fate for me without a second thought. They had declared me dead, erased me from their lives. They thought they could keep me here, isolated, locked away, but they didn't know me. Not anymore. I wasn't their victim. Had to do this. For me. For the life I had lived. For the memories I had fought to keep. That evening, as the nurses made their rounds, I stood in front of the locked door, my fingers trembling slightly as I slid the small key into the lock. It turned smoothly, and the door creaked open just enough for me to slip through. I could feel my heart racing, each step I took deeper into the unknown. I walked through the back hall, my eyes scanning for any signs of staff or security. The curtain was exactly where he had said it would be. I pulled it back slowly, revealing the narrow passage behind it. My breath caught as I stepped forward into the dark, hidden space. The sound of my footsteps seemed deafening in the quiet. I knew this was my only chance. The exit wasn't far now. All I had to do was get through that final door and into the night. But there was one last hurdle, the staff. They were my biggest obstacle now. They would notice my absence soon enough, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. With a steady breath, I pushed the final door open, stepping out into the cool evening air. The freedom I felt hit me like a wave. Overwhelming, exhilarating, terrifying. I had made it. I was free. But this wasn't the end. I wasn't going to stop until I was back home, until I could reclaim my life, my dignity, and everything that Tom and Clara had tried to take from me. This was only the beginning. I hadn't expected to feel so empty walking up to my own doorstep. But there it was, the sight that broke me all over again. The sign, bright red, stark against the soft green of the lawn. For sale. It felt like the last piece of my identity had been ripped away. This house, this place I had fought for, built with my own hands, was no longer mine. It was just another commodity for someone else to buy and sell. I stood frozen for a moment, staring at it, my heart pounding in my chest. How could Tom have done this? How could he reduce everything I had worked for into a price tag? But I was not going to let him win. Not this time. I stepped forward, my fingers gripping the cold brass of the door handle. It creaked open with the familiar sound I hadn't realized I missed until now. The smell of aged wood, the echo of the past. It all hit me like a wave. This was my home. It had been my fortress, the place where I raised Tom, where I built a life with Harold, where we had laughed, cried, and lived through it all. And now, Tom wanted to sell it. I pushed the door open fully, stepping into the dim light of the hallway. The house felt quieter now, emptier. But I knew I wasn't just here to remember. I was here to fight. The house still held its secrets, and I was determined to find them. The first thing I did was head for the study. The wooden desk Harold had built himself stood where it always had. The papers on the desk were covered in dust, but underneath the mess, I knew there had to be something that could help me take back what was mine. I rummaged through the drawers, my hands shaking slightly as I dug through old receipts, photographs, and bills. I was about to give up when I found an old box, hidden beneath a pile of forgotten letters. Inside there were old family records, documents I had nearly forgotten about, titles, deeds, and something else. A letter from a lawyer, dated just a few months ago. I read it slowly, feeling the air grow heavier with every word. It was addressed to Tom, and it contained the details of the power of attorney he had obtained. The very document that had stripped me of everything. It was no coincidence. This had all been planned. Tom had manipulated me, made me believe I was doing the right thing when, in reality, he had been plotting his own gain the entire time. But that wasn't all. There was something more hidden within those papers. An old journal. Harold's journal. As I opened the worn leather cover, the familiar handwriting filled my heart with a sense of grief and strength. It was filled with memories, notes of the past, and plans for our future that we never had the chance to fulfill. But it was the last few pages that caught my eye. Harold had written about the house, about the legacy we were building together. And then, just below it, a note to me. No matter what happens, this house is ours. Don't ever let anyone take it from you, Evelyn. Promise me. I felt the tears rise in my throat as I traced his words. Promised him. I promised him I would never let this house, this legacy, slip away. And now, Tom had taken everything. Not just my home but my dignity, my trust, my life's work. I couldn't let this happen. I wasn't just fighting for my house anymore. I was fighting for my name, for the woman I had been and the woman I would become. I knew what I had to do. With the journal in my hands and the papers in my pocket, I went through every room, searching for anything that would give me the edge. Old documents, photographs, receipts, everything I could find I tucked away. These weren't just papers. They were my proof, my fight. I wasn't just going to walk away from this anymore. I was going to stand up. For Harold, for myself, for the life I had built. And I wasn't going to let Tom or Clara erase me without a fight. I could feel the anger simmering inside me, but it wasn't just anger. It was justice. They had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I was done being passive, done being their victim. I wasn't just reclaiming my house. I was reclaiming my life. As I left the study, I felt a strange calm. For the first time since I had stepped into this house, I knew what I had to do. I would fight not just in court, but in the hearts of the people who had known me. I had been their neighbor, their friend, the woman who had worked and loved and lived here for decades. It wasn't just about documents and contracts. It was about truth. And I had the truth on my side. The courtroom was tense, the air thick with anticipation. I stood at the back, just outside the doors, a deep breath grounding me as I glanced at the stack of documents in my hands. This wasn't just about reclaiming my house. It was about something much bigger. It was about taking back the dignity they had stolen from me. My son, Tom, and his wife, Clara, were about to learn that there was no way to escape the truth. Not this time. The large wooden doors swung open, and I walked into the courtroom, my head held high. I could hear the murmur of voices as I passed, the gasps of recognition, the quiet whispers that spread like wildfire when the public saw who was entering. The room fell silent as I approached the front, and I could feel every pair of eyes on me. Miss Annalise Dubosi stood beside me, her presence calm and strong, a woman who had become my greatest ally in this battle. I had never imagined needing anyone so much, but in this moment she wasn't just my lawyer. She was my armor. Tom sat near the front, his face pale, his eyes darting between me and the rest of the room. His hand fidgeted with the documents in front of him, his usually composed demeanor slipping as he tried to mask the panic. Clara, sitting beside him, had that same cold, calculated look. I knew what she was thinking, how to get out of this, how to twist the narrative in their favor. But I wasn't going to let them. "Your Honor," Miss Dubosi began, her voice steady, commanding the attention of the room. "We are here today to expose a fraud, a betrayal that has been conducted in secrecy and manipulation. Mrs. Evelyn Hawthorne, who is standing before you, is alive, well, and very much in control of her own life. The documents that have been presented by her son, Mr. Thomas Hawthorne, are not only false, they are part of a larger scheme to strip her of her home, her legacy, and her dignity." The courtroom was silent as Miss Dubosi laid out the evidence. Copies of the forged power of attorney, emails, the documents from the bank, and testimonies from the people who had witnessed Tom's manipulations. Each piece was like a stone in the wall they had built around me, and now it was all coming down. "You see," Miss Dubosi continued, "these actions are not just about a house. They are about a woman who has spent decades building a life, a woman who has loved and nurtured her family. These actions, these lies, were designed to strip her of everything she worked for, and to push her into a corner where she could not defend herself. But today we are putting an end to that." I stood there, calm but fierce, feeling a surge of power rise within me. I had no need to yell, no need to beg for mercy. The truth was my weapon, and it was sharper than any knife. Tom opened his mouth, trying to speak, but no words came out. He was speechless, his face red, his eyes wide with disbelief. Clara, sitting stiffly beside him, cast a quick glance at me, but her gaze faltered when she saw the certainty in my eyes. She didn't speak either. They both knew it was over. Then I took the stand. I didn't need to shout or point fingers. I simply told my story, the truth of how my son had slowly pushed me out of my own life, how he and Clara had manipulated me, how they had pretended to care for my well-being while secretly plotting to take everything I held dear. I spoke calmly, clearly, each word grounded in the evidence we had gathered. The room was silent, every eye focused on me. "I trusted him," I said, my voice steady. "I trusted him with everything I had. But in the end he betrayed me. He didn't just take my house. He took my family. He took my dignity. But I'm not going to let him take anything else." The judge, a stern woman with a sharp gaze, looked over the documents and the evidence. After a long pause she spoke, her voice firm. "In light of the overwhelming evidence presented, I hereby rule that the power of attorney is void. The sale of Mrs. Hawthorne's property is invalid, and the ownership of the property is to be returned to her immediately." The gavel came down with a resounding thud, sealing our victory. The courtroom erupted in whispers, some in shock, others in admiration, but I didn't look back. I didn't need their approval. My son, my flesh and blood, had tried to take everything from me, but I had taken it back. I had stood tall, and I had fought not just for my house, but for my name, for my legacy. As I left the courtroom, my heart was heavy, but not from sorrow. It was the weight of justice. I had done it. I had fought for myself, for Harold, and for my grandchildren. I had shown them that no matter what happened, I would never be silenced, never be erased. And then, standing in front of my house, the one they had tried to sell off, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. The house was still mine, but more importantly, I had reclaimed my life. I had taken back my place in the world, and no one could ever take that from me again. I turned to walk inside, the door swinging open with a familiar creak. As I stepped over the threshold, I didn't feel the loss of the family I thought I had. I felt the strength of the woman I had become. The battle was over, but the war for my future had just begun.